us shocks, the ripples of it coming already to us from the conflict in the Ukraine. Would you speak more in depth about what this idea engenders and how Belize, which can be seen with its own landmass as one of the breadbaskets of the region, how Belize could factor into that?
Well, certainly, I think, unfortunately, President Ali had already left, or sort of asked him to be here. What he did, along with the ministers of agriculture, they did an entire study and from the different countries in CARICOM to see what are the products that we can grow, and then putting it almost like in a matrix, so that where there are certain advantages that we may have. And the idea is that we can try to grow more of what we eat. For instance, we import poultry. There's no need for us to be importing poultry. Or some of the greens, I mean, like corn and beans, the different meats. All of that can be grown here in the Caribbean. And Belize certainly is no exception. One of the ideas that actually Prime Minister Motley brought up, which is about the industrialization, to have a working group for industrialization policy, is also because there are a lot of products that we can grow, but we are not adding value to the product, as opposed to just selling the raw product. And that is why then we invited President Santoki to be able to lead that team. It's a comprehensive study, and we can make it available to you, and it can show, it can address the issue of food security, but also that there's a market of, I think already worth $16 billion in CARICOM. 6 billion. Yeah, $6 billion market. And if we can capture, I think they're talking about 25% by 2025, and then push to capture more of that market and keep the money within the region, it will create more opportunities, more jobs, grow the economy within the region, as opposed to growing the economies in other areas.
If I could ask as a follow-up, sir, but we know that one of the elephants in the room in this region are the barriers to trade. And these are very real, and we know that there is, for a number of reasons, cultural among them, antipathy towards products produced in the region, and many times we favor imported products from outside the region. We know the well-known case taken to court and the CCJ of Belize and Trinidad over sugar, a subject very near to you. How do we make the tariffs functional so that we can create a marketplace or a commercial space for our products to truly move freely and more cheaply across borders?
Well, that's something that has to start with us as heads. And today, all heads made a commitment once again to be able to try to move that integration even more, or certainly faster, because we are realizing that by doing that, our people benefit. And we also have to appeal to the private sector in our individual countries. As you pointed out with sugar, in Belize, we have made the necessary adjustments and changes to be able to meet the requirements. And it goes both ways. And more than ever, I believe that because of the shocks that we've been getting, the economic shocks over the past 2 years, I believe that now there is a renewed commitment to the single market integration in the Caribbean. I would ask Prime Minister Motley to add a little bit more. She has been doing most of the heavy lifting with this, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, before I answer, let me thank you and the people of Belize for your wonderful hospitality in hosting us as CARICOM heads of government and our delegations over the last 2 days. I teased you and indicated that you handled it with a level of efficiency such that this is the first press conference I'm participating in daylight at a CARICOM heads of government meeting, at least starting in daylight. Let me say that with respect, just to give context, the 25 by 25 came as a result of the regional agricultural ministers meeting in Bridgetown in 2018. And we indicated then that we really, as a region, needed to recognize that food and water were becoming the new oil, and that we needed to be able to reduce the volume of imports while at the same time increasing the opportunities for our agricultural sector, our farmers in particular, but at the same time seeking to do two other things. One, reduce the cost of food, and two, encourage our people to eat more locally grown food that would be better for them and would help us in reducing the bills we hope in the long run, medium to long term, that we spend in fighting chronic non-communicable diseases. There's too much diabetes, there's too much hypertension, there's too much strokes. All of these things our populations are facing. I therefore am more than happy this evening that President Ali, who has responsibility in the quasi-cabinet for agriculture and food security, was able to move with dispatch, even in the midst of a pandemic over the course of the last year, to bring together the ministers of agriculture, to work with financiers, to meet with companies dealing with possibilities for crop insurance, to deal with the barriers that you spoke about, the sanitary and phytosanitary barriers we now have to address fully. The president of Suriname is here. He will speak to those barriers too, but CAFSA, which the Caribbean Agricultural Health and Food Safety Agency, is located in Suriname, so that we recognize that this is going to require a number of things happening at the same time. We're happy that we've gotten this far. The next step is on May 19th, an investment conference in Georgetown, Guyana, May 19th to the 21st, where we seek to bring together both the public and private sector in order to determine what the investment opportunities are. Broadly speaking, we recognize that not only can we be self-sufficient in poultry in the region, we're importing, just over $200 million in poultry, US dollars in poultry a year. Two, we recognize that we can also seek to position ourselves by 2025 to be self-sufficient in food, in the feedstock, for poultry, while still having the capacity to export. And to that extent, the government of Guyana, President Ali, was able to make the point that 25,000 hectares will be needed to be dedicated to corn and soya production. And if we can do that throughout the region, not just Guyana, Guyana is more than willing, but Suriname, Belize, Jamaica in particular. And then in terms of those of us who produce poultry, there are about 5 or 6 countries that are reasonably self-sufficient within the region, more or less. There are some peculiar items, like some countries like backs. I think Jamaica is a heavy utilizer of backs. In Barbados, it is wings. Different countries have different preferences. But by bringing everything together, it allows us for the first time to plan and to have some level of integration in terms of our production from the feedstock right back through to the production of poultry. He also looked, President Ali also looked at a number of root crops and a number of vegetables that are the main ones that we import into the region: broccoli, cauliflower, pumpkin, etc. And in addition to that, he then took 3 products for which there is great potential value added. There's a lot of palm oil, for example, imported into the region, but there's no reason why we shouldn't be using coconut oil, which in any event has particular health benefits. And we looked at 1 or 2 other items where the value added can be there, so that you're not only looking at your basics, but those things that have value added. I'm satisfied that we have the capacity with the agro-processing that is done in the region, and for which there is a healthy market, to be able to expand that. Many of us see producers out of Trinidad and Jamaica, and they occupy a lot of room on our shelves. They're exporting. So I do believe that the regional audience, the people of the region, will respond positively. But let me also say this. When we started this, there was no global disruption of the supply chain. In the last year, there has been, with the prices of containers and freight going through the roof, and where people are literally being held to ransom on the eve of their containers being shipped, to have in some instances to pay 3 and 4 times what they would otherwise pay for freight. That was before the war in Russia, Russian troops into Ukraine. And I expect that that will have further implications for freight costs. That was equally before oil reached 113 US dollars a barrel. That was that this morning. I don't know what it closed at this evening. So when you take all of these things into consideration, we not only want to thank President Ali, but we want to urge the region to move with absolute dispatch in being able to get the investment opportunities. And why? A lot of these products that we're talking about, crops that we're talking about, are 6-week and 12-week crops. So it is not beyond the capacity of the region to urgently deal with the production of some of the things that we're importing. But it requires political will. It requires bringing together the complexity of the issues, from insurance, crop insurance in a climate crisis, to access to financing, to removal of the barriers that you spoke about, to insurance, to technology, and to access to the land. And of course, to a population willing to work the land in order to produce the goods. We believe that the infusion of technology and capital can make a huge difference. And President Ali also pointed out the importance of digitization in terms of different processes within food production in the region that we need to embrace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Somebody have another question? Or you, sorry, you have a follow-up or something, George?
Yes, sir, if I may. I'll just segue it so I can make it seem like a follow-up. Because that antipathy, that native instinct that resists local production or regional products is perhaps a vestige of colonialism or neo-colonialism, and that brings us to reparatory justice and reparations. I did not hear you mention it in your overview, but did that factor at all into these conversations over the past 2 days, and how seriously committed is the region to reparations for the transatlantic slave trade?
Before I pass on to the Prime Minister on that, I just want to point out that I think in the region we're starting to accept more and more the local products. I mean, Grace products sell in Belize and everybody buy it, you know, and I just use that as one example, or the products on Barbados, we're accepting. So it's that we're seeing that gradual shift, and if we can then improve on the product, improve in its marketing, and certainly with the pricing, I don't see that being a problem that we start to buy more of the products that we grow. And then we have to grow more of the products, well, to eat more of the products that we grow and grow more of what we want to eat. So just wanted to see that, but go ahead, Prime Minister.
Thank you. On the topic of reparatory justice, I think that I chair the Prime Ministerial Subcommittee on Reparations. Last year, we had taken a decision that we would write to the African Union before we wrote to the European nations who were responsible for colonizing our territories and for the enslavement of our forefathers. Today, we shared a draft letter that will go to the heads of different European nations, and we will await the comments of our colleague heads with respect to that actual draft letter, but we anticipate that that letter will go off soon. Might I say that this is not the first letter that CARICOM heads will be sending. I think that a predecessor of mine sent a letter in 2016, and there was a response to it. And while it was noted that this was a dark period in the history of our countries and theirs, there was not an acknowledgement of the need for reparations. Since then, however, we've had the George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. We've had a recognition by the global population, especially younger people, that there's a need for climate justice. And I think we're dealing with a world that generally is intolerant of the kind of inequity and poverty and discrimination that has come to characterize too much of the last 3 to 4 decades in particular of global activity and development. So we will send off the letters, and we will hope to start a mature engagement on matters that are fundamental to us. And why? We had no development compact given to us at the point of independence, but there was a compensatory package for those who were slave owners, and there was a further package for the apprenticeship system. I think that my officials and advisors counted at about £20 million for the British planters, who had slaves, and another 27 million pounds as a result of the apprenticeship system. So that 47 million pounds was given in the middle of the 19th century. Fast forward now, 130 years to Jamaica becoming independent, Trinidad becoming independent, Guyana becoming independent, Barbados, and we go down the line. None of us were given a development compact. We had to start providing for our people without the benefit of any source of development funding. We had to deal with lack of housing, lack of educational opportunities, lack of healthcare facilities, and we had to do this in spite of the fact that substantial wealth was extracted from our countries for centuries, in spite of the fact that substantial wealth was extracted not only by the governments, but also by the private players who were the owners of the plantations or the owners of the enterprises doing business and trade in our part of the world. And whether we like it or not, it is regrettable that the region to which we belong effectively was the modern crucible for racism in the Americas and in the Western world. And this is where it played out. And that is why on Sunday I made the point that we cannot be content to be the staging ground in the Caribbean for anybody's battles. And that is why the Caribbean must always remain a zone of peace going forward, because we've already been that staging ground for centuries. We now want also to recognize the fact that in Haiti, for example, after declaring independence, to have extracted from Haiti the repayment of customs duties for more than a century is perhaps one of the most egregious acts, particularly when you consider where Haiti is today in the development profile. And therefore, I hope that this can be a sensible and mature discussion. It is no different from other discussions that have taken place with respect to people doing wrong. In private law, you can do wrong through breach of contract or tortious interference. In development, there has been an act, regrettably, that has left us suffering. And we hope that we can engage with the European countries to make sure that there's an appropriate framework to fuel our development at this difficult time in history. Thank you.
Great. I'd like to invite Aaron Humes, who is online. Also, I'd like to just remind those who are joining us via Zoom, if you can utilize the raise hand feature so that we're able to come to you and have you ask your questions. You can go ahead, Aaron.
Thank you, Prime Minister, Prime Minister Motley, everyone, welcome. Thanks for being here. Thanks for allowing us to host you. Prime Minister Motley, you spoke just now about the injustice suffered by Haiti, and that segues into my question, which is concerning, was there any assurances given by Prime Minister Henry with regard to restoring the government and having elections for time, as I think it should have been in February, but I'm not sure if there was any, if it was held or if there was any postponement. And just generally, how is the Caribbean prepared to help Haiti get back on its feet after the year from hell, quite frankly, with the assassination and the earthquake and so on?
I think the issue of Haiti, I think, Mr. Chairman, you'll deal with.
Issue of Haiti, we had a long discussion. We all recognize that Haiti is one of us, and great injustices have happened in that country. And basically what we have done is that we've agreed after a long discussion and listening to the Prime Minister of Haiti, we're saying that we will establish a CARICOM team to be able to visit Haiti with a view to providing support in the facilitation of dialogue. Because when there are so many different competing groups, it's important for us to be able to move forward in Haiti that we have to bring everyone around the table. We have to try to support, well, we have to support the administration in holding credible elections It's of no use to have an election right now, and then you have a large portion of the population not accepting that. And also, as CARICOM, we want to be able to support a framework for long-term development and building democracy through technical assistance within the same heads here in CARICOM that we're prepared to help. Pretty much, in short, that's what we ended up discussing and agreeing to this in this meeting.
Just a minute, Aaron.
Yes, go ahead.
Apologies.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, Aaron. Can
Okay,
you
yes, go
repeat
ahead.
your question, please?
Okay, sure. I was saying in terms of the Belize Guatemala dispute that is before the International Court of Justice. I know CARICOM has been a strong supporter of Belize, and I presume that that has been renewed in terms of the discussions yesterday and today, and also Guyana and Venezuela. How critical is that support in terms of moving that situation forward, and what will be the response to the president of Guatemala when the CARICOM SICA summit is held starting tomorrow? Prime Minister.
Well, certainly, CARICOM continues to be the strongest supporter of Belize in the unfounded claim of Guatemala. Our foreign minister did give an update as to the case where we are, and CARICOM listened keenly and continues to support us. We believe that now that the case is now in the hands of the ICJ, we will be soon presenting our memorial or back to the ICJ, and we hope that by, I think, towards the end of 2023, 2024, we will be able to finalize that case at the ICJ. And the same thing occurred with the issue between, again, Guyana and Venezuela. We listened to President Ali's presentation in his concerns, and he is moving on to the ICJ, even though Venezuela is saying that they're not going to participate. We continue to support, as CARICOM, both Belize and Guyana.
All right, thank you, Aaron. We'll move back in. We do have a full house online as well as reporters in here, so we'd like to move to the next reporter here at the conference center.
Hi. Good evening to the head table and all those in attendance. Paul Lopez, News 5. First question, two-part question. Perhaps the head table can clarify in terms of what systems are in place to track production, supply, and demand within the Caribbean in order to coordinate exchange in a manner that is necessary? And how confident are we that countries will be able to access the capital needed for investment in order for greater production, considering the fact that many nations, all nations across the Caribbean have been faced with severe economic challenges due to COVID-19?
Well, on the issue of keeping track of production, obviously we have to do it between individual countries, passing on information here to the Secretariat, who will be able to keep track and inform the shortfalls on any products that we may need in the different countries. So that is one. And then the second one was?
Investments.
Investments, yes. On investments, again, President Ali has spoken to several institutions. Certainly CDB is one of them. And also to the Republic Bank in Trinidad. And Republic Bank in Trinidad already indicated that they are prepared to make a sizable amount of money in the millions available at very, very low concessionary rates of between 2 to 2.5% for farmers in the region.
Question, second question, on the issue of climate change, how perhaps PM Motley could address this. How does the Caribbean community, how do we go about holding developed nations accountable? What mechanisms are in place or what can be implemented to hold these nations accountable for the devastation that is being caused by climate change, particularly in the Caribbean community?
In short, our continued advocacy obviously is critical. Our solidarity and our advocacy as a region, but also with other small island developing states, and then seeking to build coalitions with other countries that are affected. We made the point that aside small island developing states are on the front line, but clearly it was not sufficient to move the world into urgent action. And therefore we broadened the group to include those countries between the Tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. Separate from advocacy, there are a few countries that are looking at their legal options and seeking to see what is possible, but this is very much uncharted territory. And that's why the advocacy and the diplomacy remain the primary weapons, especially on the issue of loss and damage. In the Paris Agreement, there was reference also to the Warsaw Mechanism for Loss and Damage. That's why at Glasgow we made the point that we were not happy that there's been no appropriate framework for loss and damage, particularly since the G20 countries are responsible for 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and we are obviously the ones on the front line with that. So advocacy and legal research. Potentially that will determine whether there's a justiciable action or not, but there's no clarity because it's uncharted territory.
One of the things that we decided also is to at every meeting to speak about climate change, because climate change is it's pretty much life and death for us here in the Caribbean. And so we are putting it as something of one of the more important issues that we have to be discussing constantly. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. I'd now like to move back online to Vishani Raghuber, and I do apologize in advance if I do not get your name correct, but Miss Vishani?
Thank you. Vishani Raghuber from the newsroom in Guyana. Prime Minister, in your opening remarks, you said that President Ali's presentation on food security was embraced by all. But can you say if any perhaps rigid timelines have been agreed upon to roll out some of those strategies or proposals, whatever it was, from President Ali?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think I announced earlier that the investment conference is carded for May 19th to May 21st in Georgetown, Guyana. So this is a necessary prerequisite to us going further, because without money, we won't have the ability to help the farmers. The money from Republic Bank is effectively being offered to governments to help farmers. And in some instances, it will be state-led, and in some instances, it will be private sector-led. In addition, the Caribbean Private Sector Organization made a presentation looking at the poultry sector in particular and recognizing the opportunities there. So we hope that the private sector, the regional private sector, will also come to the table ready to make the decisions for investment that will allow us to achieve this target of 25 by 25. Thank you.
If I may, because Prime Minister Motley just mentioned the CPS. So earlier this year, there were some concerns raised by that organization about Guyana's local content law. Can you say if those concerns were raised at this meeting?
Yes, within the context of the discussions on the CARICOM single market and economy, we placed before heads, and heads accepted, that there is need for us to review the issue of local content. And there's an open-ended committee of member states that will start to work very shortly, recognizing that in new areas of economic activity, what we call sunrise industries, there may well be, and I certainly support, that there is a case for some level of local content. And the issue will be what should that percentage of local content be and what is the timeline that it should be valid for. Because if you're giving it to a sunrise industry, then they don't need it 30 years from now or 20 years from now. So we're going to do the discussions among ourselves with a view towards recommending to the full Conference of Heads what the appropriate framework should be, such that no one will be held in breach for wanting to do that which is most natural. That if we accept that we share the burden in hard times, then we must share the bounty in good times too. And that is all that we understand Guyana and other countries that want to introduce local content in emerging industries are seeking to do. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move back in-house.
Good evening, Head Table, Hippolyto Novello from Love News, PMs. Welcome to Belize. Secretary General, welcome back. Chairman, I want to go back to the matter of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. You mentioned about a statement being released. I'm not sure if that would be the second or the third statement now that CARICOM is speaking on, but I ask because is that the only thing that CARICOM can do? I mean, Russia won't listen to the US. I'm not too sure if he listened to us.
I think we have a moral obligation to speak out to it. And more than that also, it's not only about speaking on condemning Russia's invasion into the Ukraine, but also to speak about the plight of some of our people that are in there right now, some that want to leave, people from the Americas, from Africa. And so we believe that we need to make that known to the rest of the world.
Just a follow-up to that question, Chairman. How important was it for us to speak out, especially if we have the situation with Belize and Guatemala and Guyana and Venezuela? I mean, in terms of the moral obligation you mentioned, how important was it for CARICOM to speak out against that, what's happening there, seeing we have a situation where Guatemala is claiming Belize and that territorial issue?
Well, we have been speaking out on that. We've been screaming out about Belize and Guatemala and Guyana and Venezuela. I mean, that's been a part of CARICOM from in its inception, almost 49 years ago now.
In terms of tourism, were talks held about that and opening the Caribbean region as the economy to the millions of tourists that want to visit the countries?
What about it?
I mean, tax, importance of tourism, opening back the countries.
Well, tourism it is one of the most important industries that we have in the region, and that's why we accepted CARPA's presentation on COVID-19 and moving past the pandemic, trying to move to a sense of normalcy. We have to open up our economies. We have to pass on more the state. As a state, we have been doing all that was possible to protect our citizens. But now that we've passed through that area or that part of it, it is time now for us to pass on now to call on more personal responsibility on our citizens, that they need to get vaccinated. But we can't continue to be having curfews. We can't continue infringing in the civil liberties of people and business people, that restaurants, the entertainment industry that have been unable to operate and to earn a living. So we believe jointly that we know we need to pass that and allow people to go back to work, allow schools to be open on a normal 5 days a week, and pass on that personal responsibility on individuals to get vaccinated. We as a state have the responsibility then to be able to get the medication, so should you get ill, but it's important to open up the region.
Thank you, Hippolyto. We'll move back online to Peter Richards.
Prime Ministers, thanks for taking my question. Just before I ask my question, Prime Ministers, could I get a clarification regarding the team going into Haiti? Is it going to be a ministerial team, or is it going to, and how soon? Do you have a time frame?
Yes, it's going to be ministers and experts because we want to be able to go in and to come out with an actual plan as to how we can help Haiti, and at the same time to be able to try to reach out to the rest of the international community to be able to help in the actual development of the country. That would be a more medium and long-term part of the plan that we want to work with.
Do you expect to go in?
Sorry?
How soon do you expect to go in to Haiti with that team?
Well, I think we just decided that today, and certainly I would imagine in the next few weeks. I know we'll start, the Secretariat is going to start in making the arrangements, and as soon as we get that done and have the logistics in place, we will move in, we'll visit Haiti.
Okay, my question pertains to the whole question of the CSME, and more particularly the freedom of movement of skilled and unskilled CARICOM nationals across the region. I ask this question in the context of political consultants doing work in Caribbean countries. I'm aware, and I know Prime Minister Mia Motley is aware, for example, of our own political consultants doing work in other Caribbean countries. We have a case where it's now over 500 days now. A political consultant went into a CARICOM country, Suriname, and has not been charged, has not been brought before a court on any charge, and is now over 500 days, and he's unable to leave the country. I am aware, Prime Minister Brissino, you are aware of the situation. Any developments in that area, was it discussed? And more particularly, I'm aware that CARICOM has this extra, I think it was passed it was mooted and discussed and passed, I think, in Guyana, during the summit in Guyana a few years ago, where CARICOM nationals could be extradited to each other CARICOM country. So there is no question of somebody not being able to be extradited.
I think you're speaking with a lot of confidence as to what heads know and don't know. And I can certainly assert that I don't know what you're talking about. So perhaps if you put the facts and write us, I can investigate. But I certainly have no idea about any consultant with any 500 days. And as it relates to the freedom of movement of people, I think you're trying to conflate the freedom of movement with people with clearly a grouse that you want to investigate or have investigated. Let us leave them separate.
No, Prime Minister Motley. I'm aware that Prime Minister Brissino is aware of the situation.
Yeah, you said that you were aware that I was aware. And I can tell you without
I said you are aware of political consultants.
Without fear of contradiction, I can tell you that I am not aware of any such incident.
No, all I said, you are aware of political consultants working up and down the Caribbean. That's what I said. But I was making a particular reference to a situation in Suriname, where a political consultant, Derek Ramsamuj, who is now in Suriname, unable to leave Suriname, is now over 500 days. And I'm certain and I'm aware that Prime Minister Brissino is aware of the situation. What I'm trying to find out is whether, as CARICOM chairman, did Prime Minister Brissino raise it with his Surinamese counterpart?
Yes, I did raise it with President Sankit and Santoki, I'm sorry. I think, Santoki, and we discussed, and he has been in touch with his Attorney General, and they are saying now that that the case will go to court around the 13th.
Coming days.
In the next coming days, the next 12 or so days from now. So it will be in court. And,
so he has been charged.
Yes, he has been. That's the president is telling me yes that he has been charged.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. We'll move back in-house. And I just want to indicate that we will be wrapping up shortly.
Good evening, Leticia Guerra representing Southern Media. Many times we come to these meetings and policies are presented, and it's very difficult for all countries to agree on these policies. I was made to understand that a breakthrough was made in terms of a enforced cooperation. I stand to be corrected. Can you speak on that, please? Enhanced cooperation.
Thank you. The CARICOM Commission on Economy recommended that we find a modality. In fact, and it was also accepted by the heads of government in the St. Anne's Declaration in Trinidad in December 2018, that there is a case for where a few countries are prepared to move, that they can do so through an enhanced cooperation agreement. I'm happy to report that not only did we agree on the framework for enhanced cooperation, but the protocol amending the treaty was opened this afternoon, and a number of us signed. The chairman, Prime Minister Belize signed, I signed, a number of countries signed, Prime Minister of Bahamas signed. I can't remember how many exactly signed, but countries have started to sign. This will mean that where I think the threshold is 3 countries raise an issue. Once we can reach an agreement of 2/3 of the community, that we can go ahead without unanimity. So that enhanced cooperation is critical towards us being able to progress within the community without necessarily requiring everybody to move at the same pace. And this is a recognition that there are individual circumstances in a community of sovereign nations that might not allow everybody to move at the same pace. Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll move back online to Kimon Francis.
Thank you. Good evening. Kimon Francis from The Gleaner. 2 quick questions. What plans are being or have been put in place to assist member states in absorbing the shock expected from Russia's invasion of Ukraine? And has CARICOM as a regional body considered sanctions against Russia?
We agreed this evening for the establishment of the CARICOM Economic Recovery Transformation Subcommittee, which I chair, to be expanded to include the Caribbean Development Bank, the CARICOM Development Fund, and the CARICOM Commission on Economy, recognizing that the multiplicity of issues that are coinciding now will present tremendous difficulties and challenges to our region. And we therefore need to see how best we can approach it, at the same time utilizing functional cooperation and assisting one another where possible. The increase in energy prices is clearly going to be a major challenge for us, but I also expressed concern earlier this evening with respect to freight costs and the supply chain. We also recognize that any efforts that we have to increase food production must be urgent, because the increase in prices is likely for food as a result of the dominant role that both Russia and Ukraine play in the production of both corn and soya. So we hope that that subcommittee can meet in the upcoming weeks to further refine the kinds of proposals. We recognize equally that we have to continue engagement with the international financial institutions as well. And let us be very clear, we in the region have increased our debt largely as a result of us fighting this climate crisis. It has therefore left us less capable of absorbing the shocks with respect to this war in Ukraine than we might otherwise be. It therefore is critical for us to raise with the international financial institutions and with the G20 countries the extent to which the climate crisis has literally derailed us from our development trajectory, and in particular the pursuit and attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, one of which is the elimination of hunger and the elimination of poverty. So to that extent, it's going to be a difficult and challenging period, but it is not impossible for us to do the things that can boost economic activity. There's a lot of economic opportunity in fighting the climate crisis. For example, the introduction of renewable energy will spark significant investments having to be made in our part of the world. to mitigate. The cost for adaptation, if we accept that the world is on course, regrettably, to a 1.5 degrees destination within the next 12 to 15 years, then it means that we really don't have a lot of time to adapt. And adapting means dealing with our water supply. It means dealing with our coastal protection. You here in Belize are a perfect example of the kinds of work. We in Barbados have also done a lot of coastal defense work, because if the salt water gets into your wells, water wells, it then negatively affects your ability to supply fresh water. And then, of course, there's the issue of roofs. There are too many roofs and too many houses in the Caribbean that continue to be vulnerable to high winds and storms and floods. And if we're going to prepare ourselves and adapt to the new realities of a 1.5 world or a 1.4 world, then significant sums of money have to be spent in capital expenditure to prepare ourselves privately and publicly. That means that we're going to have to settle the sources of funding, be it grant or be it concessional funding. The problem with concessional funding is that you still need fiscal space. And if you're heavily indebted already because of previous crises, then you have limited room to borrow. So it's almost a catch-22, and that is why we say that we're going to have to engage the international community in a far more aggressive way, aggressive not in tone, but aggressive in terms of regularity of meetings, so that we can bring resolution to these issues. And we also took note of the fact that the climate vulnerability of the region really places us at the front line in a way that nothing else does. So I think we are at the stage where there is a common recognition that we really do need to work together, and we shall see how it goes. Everybody has problems today, but the fact that other people have problems does not stop us from prosecuting our own and trying to create the space for ourselves as we do. We do accept, too, that there is far more room for internal self-reliance, but we're not quite at that stage. We have both Guyana and Suriname new to the fossil fuel industry, not just Trinidad and Tobago that has been dominant for a century. And that is going to hopefully be a game changer, but that is not today or next week or next month. There's still a few years away, both from that and the corn and soya production that we want by 2025. So it's going to be challenging, but it is not impossible for us to succeed. In fact, I'm still hopeful that we can do a lot and benefit a lot for our people going forward in spite of these challenges. But it does require discipline, and it does require creativity. Thank you.
Now we'll move to our final two media
Has
representatives.
CARICOM as a regional body considered sanctions against Russia?
Well, we discussed the issue on Russia at length, and felt at the moment that we would leave it to, so we, as CARICOM, felt that is something that we should do as individual countries. We have to decide what kind of sanctions, if any, that we can take as countries and not as CARICOM.
All right, we'll move on to the final online question from Nestor Philip.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I am Nestor Philip from News Fresh Out. My question is, in the context of citizenship by investment programs, some Caribbean countries basically have that's a cash cow for them. They make a mint out of that. In the context of the Ukraine, Russia conflict, in the context of revenue generation, in the context of general development, has CARICOM considered the implications of that conflict on that cash cow called citizenship by investment, especially given that even the European Union countries are considering clamping down on the so-called golden passport scheme? And then secondly, Prime Minister Motley basically explained how is it that climate change is a major headache. But how can we reconcile, especially for the common person, that we are concerned about climate change, but we still praise oil and gas countries like Trinidad, Guyana as so-called game changers? So how do we reconcile digging for more oil, enjoying oil revenues, yet crying about climate change, put it in local parlance? Thank you.
On the first part of your question, we did not discuss that. So would not be able to give you an answer on that one. On the second one, on the issue of oil in the region, for over a century or more, we've had some of the richer countries that have exploited their resources, their petroleum, and now that we have in the Caribbean to suggest that we should not put it to use to develop a region, I think would be unjustifiable. And I think we need to find a way how we can. But you want to add to it, Prime Minister?
If I can add to that, I think we need a strong public education program, Mr. Chairman, in the region. Net zero does not mean zero fossil fuel. And regrettably, because we use those phrases, people have assumed that net zero means zero fossil fuels. Net zero by 2050 contemplates, I think the International Energy Agency contemplates, a minimum of 20% fossil fuels being necessary to still do what has to be done in the world to become net zero. It is against that backdrop that countries like Guyana and others have said, look, and Ghana and others outside of this region, that if we want to be able to finance our development to net zero, then you can't ask us to ignore the reality of what fossil fuels we have. And to that extent, the world needs to have a complex and nuanced discussion as to how all countries benefit within the context of the containment of the volume of fossil fuels that we produce. But if you say no new fossil fuels from any of these new countries, all you're doing is preserving an old world order, which in fact does not in any way help developing countries to being able to achieve net zero and to play their role. And when you add to that the absence of a development compact, and you add to that the cost of COVID-19, and you add to that the climate crisis, it's almost a veritable perfect storm. Not everything can be reduced to 4 column inches or a 60-second soundbite. There are some things that require mature, complex discussions because the issues are complex, and this is one of them. Thank you.
Go ahead, President.
I forgot to make the point, too, that Guyana already has one of the largest carbon sinks in the world. So you can't talk about Guyana's use of fossil fuels without recognizing that Guyana is, in fact, playing its role way beyond most countries in the world already. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Suriname is also one of the countries with huge oil and gas discoveries. And we do have a strategy, and our strategy is quite clear, that the oil and gas is there, and that should be exploited in an environment-friendly manner. And the modern technology is available, and that should be utilized to promote the exploitation of oil and gas in a friendly, environment-friendly manner. That's one side. The other side is that based also on the income of the oil and gas, you should initiate the green energy strategy. And we started in our country already with the solar energy. We have also the hydro energy. There's a study going on for the wind energy. It is a strategy which should go hand in hand. On one hand, to make use of the available fossil energy so that our people, our nation, our region can benefit from it in such a way that it not should impact the environment. And as you know, Suriname is one of the top 3 countries which has a status of carbon negative. And that is given an indication that we should keep it like that we are functioning as a carbon sink nation for the entire world, that we do have a sustainable forest with a forest management. However, we are not benefiting from that forest as a carbon sink nation from the world. So this is one of the areas what we are discussing also within the Caribbean and with other international institutions that based on our position that we as country, we as nation, we as Caribbean nations, Belize, Guyana, Suriname, that we should benefit also from our forests through a carbon credit strategy. So that is what we have as a comprehensive strategy based on our oil and gas and also to initiate the green energy in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we move into our final question in house.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dion Vanson from the San Pedro Sun. I just want to do a follow-up on climate change. Here in Belize, and I guess in most countries in the Caribbean, we have seen the effects. And one of the effects here on the island in Ambergris Caye is, erosion. We're losing beaches, and of course, the coral reef is getting affected by bleaching. Just want to find out if any immediate plans to fight these effects were discussed in this meeting, and if there were any additional ideas for renewable energy that we can use in Belize and also in the Caribbean.
Well, as you know, here in Belize, we've been pushing more and more for the renewable energy, or green energy, as we would call. And as a government, we've been doing our best to attract more that kind of investment. The Caribbean as a whole, CARICOM, we are known for green policies. As I said at COP26 in frustration, that we have been doing our part. It's the developed countries that are not doing their part. We're finding out even now on the $100 billion that they promise to give every year. It seems that we're not even getting that at this moment. And secondly, even to access that fund, they make it so difficult. And that is why we have to continue to advocate to ensure that the developed countries put the money that they promised and to put even more for us to be able to make the necessary adaptations, and also then for us to be able to access that money. What the developed countries don't understand or don't want to understand is that climate change will affect them also. It's affecting them right now. And cities like Miami and New Orleans will disappear. As much money that they want to put in, it will disappear if they do nothing about it. So we have to continue advocating and pushing and talking as CARICOM, and then also reach out to other countries. For instance, like SICA is going to be here tomorrow. President and Prime Minister Gaston Brown doing an amazing work through EOSIS in trying to get all the small island states to be able to speak with one voice.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And as we move to close, I'd like to invite President Santoki to speak on plans for hosting the next meeting.
Yes, sure. Before doing that, I'm taking this opportunity to express on behalf of all the CARICOM leaders, the delegates, to express our sincere thanks to the chairman of the meeting, Prime Minister Brissino, for his excellent leadership, his excellent chairmanship, and he managed to guide this meeting with a very tough agenda to a very successful meeting with also important decision for the CARICOM and also for the future of CARICOM. The agenda had been set out by previous chairperson. The agenda had been set out by the current chair and the secretariat. And yes, we will continue with the agenda of CARICOM. But now after 6 months in Suriname, and I'm inviting everyone to come to Suriname to attend the conference, but also taking the opportunity to see the beauty and the diversity of my country. There are topics already identified during this meeting which will be discussed on our meeting in Suriname. So once again, Mr. Chair, I'm thanking you, and I'm thanking also the people of Belize, particularly the people from San Pedro, for their hospitality, for their warm welcome. Many thanks.
President Santoki, again, thank you very much for your kind words, and certainly we look forward to be joining you in Suriname in July. Thank you very much, everyone, and buenas noches. Good night.